You look at this scene and you don't know whether to laugh or get angry. Ubisoft lets off fireworks celebrating the launch of Black Flag Resynced, everyone clapping for the numbers and the nostalgia, and just across the hall, people who built this experience are being called into the HR room. It is surreal. The celebration became a symbol of the industry. The game itself is a success. Critics are applauding, saying that the remaster respects the original, that naval combat returned with grace, that it is worth the price. You see good scores everywhere, and it is not just the critics. Players are approving, pre-orders exceeded expectations, communities returned to talking about Edward Kenway. From the cold perspective of numbers, it is a victory. It hit the account. Only this account never included those who made the game exist. Mass layoffs happen on the same day, in the same week. People who spent nights crunching code, adjusting textures, testing mechanics, are transformed into a balance sheet line item. Cut. So I ask you, and I want you to think with me, if even a successful game does not save those who developed it, then what does? If good pre-orders, positive reviews, and happy players do not guarantee jobs, what is the criterion? Or rather, is there a criterion? We need to make it clear that this is not Ubisoft's drama alone. This is the industry's modus operandi. Square has done it, Electronic Arts does it, Microsoft did it, smaller studios go through this too. The celebration of the product and the disposal of those who produced it is a cycle that repeats every quarter. And in the end, you realize that the franchise continues, the ship keeps sailing, but the sailors were thrown overboard, the brand lives, the memory of the game remains, and people become a statistic. That is why this celebration cuts deeper. Those who make the magic are the first to vanish when the party ends. In the past, we grew up with this idea, almost an industry fairy tale. If you made a good game, a game that people loved, the studio would be rewarded, and by extension, you who worked there would have your place guaranteed. There was a logic, a somewhat naive sense of justice, that said quality generates security. If the product shines, the employee's desk remains stable. Except today, looking at the situation of Ubisoft and so many others, this equation broke. The new rule seems to be something completely different. Deliver the project, meet the deadline, make the game run, and good luck. The success of the launch is no longer a ladder, it is a door that slams in your face. You deliver the gold and receive the layoff notice. The quality of your work, the effort, the sleepless nights, the hidden overtime, none of this guarantees stability. You could have perfected every pixel, every line of code, every sound effect, and the day after the final patch, you are out. It is not about performance, it is about the spreadsheet. The professional became a cost variable left over when the account closes, and this reveals a bizarre separation that happened in the industry. The success of the product and the success of the employee became things that no longer talk to each other. The game can be at the top of the sales charts, Metacritic can be green, pre-orders can have broken records, and those who built this still receive the news that they are no longer part of the plan. The ship reaches the port, and the crew is thrown into the sea. We see this happen because corporate logic took over. In the past, a studio was a home, a team, a long-term bet. Today, many companies function as project factories. Assemble, sell, disassemble. The mindset is quarterly. It is not about legacy. It does not matter if you love the franchise, if you lived it. It matters if your existence on the organizational chart generates immediate value. And then comes that feeling of betrayal. You know, you dedicate yourself, believe in the project, feel pride when you finally see the game in the hands of players, and the reward is a cold termination email. It is as if the industry decided that those who make the game are less important than the game itself. The brand remains, the franchise continues, the IP is polished, but the hands that touched it are disposable. So, when we look at the celebration of Black Flag Resynced, we cannot see just celebration. We can see the warning. The entire industry is sending a message, make the best game in the world, but do not expect that to protect you. Because at the end of the day, the success of the game was never yours. And the question that remains is, if making a good game does not save those who made it, what is still worth it in this market? We get to the core of the wound here. During years of development, those professionals were fundamental pieces. Ubisoft needed them, sought talent, held meetings, shook hands, said the project only existed because that team existed. They were the living investment, the expensive bet the company made to ensure that Black Flag Resynced left the promise stage and became a reality. Then the game gets finished. The trailers are live, the media is talking, players are buying, and suddenly the math changes. That same artist the company fought for in the market, that programmer who received praise emails from the director, that level designer who spent months refining naval combat, all of them see their chairs shake. The urgent need evaporated, And it is at this moment that the transformation happens. They stop being an investment and became a cost. The spreadsheet no longer has a column called essential and gains a column called cut. The corporate gaze no longer sees the person who gave life to the game's world. It sees a salary, a benefit, a number that can be zeroed out to make the balance sheet look prettier for shareholders. This logic is not exclusive to Ubisoft as much as the news came from it. It is rooted in practically every major company in the industry today. Square Enix did this, Electronic Arts does this, Microsoft did this, AAA game studios and even publishers of smaller games repeat the same script. The person is hired in the euphoria of the project and discarded in the coldness of the post-launch. What hurts most in all of this is the dehumanization. These people stop being creators and become cells in an Excel spreadsheet. The company does not fire Jose, who dreamed of making the perfect naval mechanics since he played the original. It fires position 47, design sector, annual cost of X amount, zero impact on the pipeline for the next 2 quarters. The personal history vanishes. And we, who consume these games, end up participating in this without realizing it. We buy, celebrate, post on social networks, and the algorithm understands that the brand is strong. The brand is what is left, the franchise is what matters, Assassin's Creed continues, Edward Kenway continues, but the human who modeled the texture of his coat, who adjusted the sunlight in the Caribbean, becomes a restructuring statistic. The product is eternal, whoever made it is temporary. So when you see this launch celebration, pay attention to what is truly being celebrated. It is not the victory of a team, it is the victory of a system that learned to extract everything from a person and then pretend they were never there. And if this happens in a successful game, in a remaster that everyone wanted, imagine what happens behind the scenes of games that fail. The entire industry breathes this same logic. This is not about Ubisoft, it is about us. We need to face a truth that hurts. The industry stopped selling games and started selling financial efficiency. It seems strange to talk like this, but if you look behind the scenes, that is exactly what is being negotiated. The product changed and we did not notice because we still see the game cover in the store, the beautiful trailer, the iconic character. Except those in charge today are not buying that. They are buying the return. In the past, the valuable commodity was the experience, the magic, that moment when you turned on the console and lost yourself in another world. Today, the game became a mechanism to generate a green number at the end of the quarter. Art transformed into an asset, creativity into a pipeline, and player fun became a conversion metric. It is no longer about what you feel when playing. It is about how much you spend before closing the application. Look closely at who is really celebrating during launches. It is not the artist who finally saw their perfect texture on screen. It is not the designer who spent the night adjusting the difficulty curve. And it is not you, the player, moved by the story. It is investors clapping in a meeting room, shareholders watching the chart go up, executives receiving bonuses for having optimized the operation. They celebrate the efficiency, not the game. And the most absurd thing is that this celebration happens at the worst moments for those who really matter. Employees are laid off en masse. Studios that gave soul to historic franchises are closed as if they were convenience stores. And the gaming community gets outraged, shouting for respect on social networks. Except player outrage does not appear as a loss on the balance sheet. So it is simply ignored. The main indicator of success stopped being, is this game incredible? And became, how much did it increase the profit margin? You can launch a mediocre game full of problems that leaves the player frustrated, but if the profit margin went up, that is registered as a victory. And you can launch a masterpiece, loved by critics and the community, but if the profit does not hit analysts' projections, it becomes a commercial failure just as fast. This completely inverted the logic. The game stopped being the objective and became the vehicle. The franchise exists to feed the financial machine, not the opposite. The industry is no longer concerned with creating eternal memories. It is concerned with creating revenue predictability. And when predictability requires cuts, layoffs, and closures, blood is spilled without ceremony. So when we see Ubisoft celebrating the launch of Black Flag Resynced while sending people away, we are not seeing a contradiction. We are seeing the perfect execution of this new logic. The game is the stage, financial efficiency is the true star. And the question that remains is, if the industry sells efficiency and not games, to whom does it really belong? Let me tell you, it is no longer to us who love this. When we press the buy button and see the game downloading, there is a genuine feeling of victory. It feels like something was returned to us, the fans, after years of waiting. Finally, we think, we received a new Assassin's Creed. And in that instant, we genuinely celebrate, because the franchise we have followed for so long is alive, breathing, ready to be explored again. The feeling is of pure gain, except we rarely look at the other side of the coin at that exact moment. We do not ask, who are the people who just delivered this? And more importantly, who is going to make the next one? The industry trained us to see the game as an object that simply appears, an artifact born out of nowhere. But it is not born out of nowhere. It is born from specific hands, from tired eyes, from professionals who spent months, sometimes years, translating love into code. The problem is that, very often, exactly these people, the most experienced ones, those who carry the memory of the franchise on their backs, are the first to be cut when the music stops. They leave. And when they leave, it is not just a vacancy left open. It is an entire library of knowledge that closes. They know why that naval mechanic works, why that sunset light on that specific map moves you, why that parkour animation feels so right. This knowledge is not written in any technical document. It is in their intuition, in the way they look at the screen. And then the team changes completely. Those who arrive to make the sequel, or the next project in the series, are a new group, talented of course, but disconnected from the original soul. They inherit the engine, the assets, the brand, the beautiful cover, but they do not inherit the care. They do not inherit the subtle obsession of those who built the world from scratch. The franchise continues, but those who kept it alive, who knew the story behind every creative decision, are already gone. Then some time passes. You pick up the next release, hopeful, and you feel something strange. The graphics are prettier, the map is bigger, the list of features is longer, but the magic evaporated. That touch, that feeling that the game was made by people who loved it as much as you do, vanished. And you catch yourself asking, maybe on a forum, maybe alone, why don't games have the same quality anymore? The answer lies in the empty hallways you never saw. The irony is cruel. We think we won a game, but we lost those who made good games. We celebrate the product, but the product, in a little while, will be made by other hands, without the same passion. And the franchise continues. Yes, the brand is there, but the promise that the next one will be as good as the one you loved falls apart in silence. The player wins now, but loses later, without even noticing the exchange. This is not a theory, it is a pattern we see repeat, not just at Ubisoft, but at giant studios we idolize. The entire industry learned to sell the illusion of continuity, but cut the roots that sustain quality. So when you finish playing this new release and think about how good it was, remember, someone who made it good might no longer be there to make the next one. And this is not about a company. It is about the way we consume, and about how the industry deceives us, launch after launch, making us think we won, when in reality, we are losing bit by bit. When we read the news about the layoffs at Ubisoft, the first instinct is to think that the problem was that cut, that cruel moment of the announcement. But the report reveals something that hurts even deeper. The team had already been warning for months that there was no new project in sight. They knew. They felt the vacuum coming. It was not a lightning bolt that fell from the sky without warning. It was a shadow that slowly extended until it swallowed the entire environment. The company knew. This is what transforms bad news into something genuinely disturbing. There was no sudden emergency, there was no unpredictable financial disaster to justify the desperation. The numbers were already there, the projections were already made, the project pipeline was already clear. When the layoff arrived, it was not a response to an external shock. It seems to have been a planned piece, moved on the board calmly, at the moment when the game no longer needed those hands. And this is worse than a crisis. Crisis generates empathy, sometimes even an excuse. We look and think, man, the company was sinking, what else could it do? But when it is not a crisis, when it is strategy, empathy dissolves. It becomes clear that there was no surprise, just a cold wait for the right moment to press the button. The game needed to be launched, revenue needed to come in, and then, only then, the scissors appeared. It is not a tragedy, it is a schedule. And then comes the question that stirs the stomach. Do companies today hire people already knowing they are going to discard them? Not as a distant possibility, but as a plan. You join to make that remaster, that DLC, that specific project, and deep down, whoever hires you already knows your chair has an expiration date. It is not about a career, it is about labor rental. It is not about building a future together, it is about using talent up to the exact point where it stops being profitable. This completely changes the nature of work in the industry. The relationship stops being between person and company and becomes between resource and project. You are not a developer who is part of a studio. You are a component of a production cycle. When the cycle closes, you are unclipped. There is no expectation of permanence. There is no investment in growth. There is only the efficiency of using and releasing, as if professionals were construction tools. What makes this reflection hurt so much is that it removes even the illusion that someone inside cared. This is not a sad management mistake. This is a perverse logic that considers it normal and acceptable to plan someone's end while still exploiting their present. The person gives their best, believes in the project, sees the launch as a collective victory, and the company, from the beginning, saw that date as the end of a usage contract. So, when we look at this celebration of Black Flag Resynced, we need to understand that the tragedy did not start the day after the launch. It started much earlier, in the months when the team no longer knew where it was going, while the company knew exactly. And if this happens with a successful remaster in a giant studio, we need to see it. This is not Ubisoft's failure. It is the recipe that the entire industry learned to follow. Hire to use, launch to profit, and lay off to optimize. Disposal is not an accident. It is the plan. There is a strange magic in returning to a game that marked us. When Ubisoft announces Black Flag again with a renewed look, it gives you that butterflies in the stomach feeling. It is not just about technology, it is about reliving a piece of our history as players. It feels like the company is saying, we know what this means to you, and we want to believe it is true. Except, if we look closely, we realize that nostalgia became an excellent business. The industry discovered that it does not need to risk a new idea, it just needs to rescue one that has already proven to work. It is like reopening a famous neighborhood diner. The name already sells, the menu is already tested, the risk is minimal. The investment is low, the return is almost guaranteed, and the public thanks them happily. Ubisoft knows this better than anyone. Black Flag is a beloved brand, a chapter that many consider the peak of the franchise. Players buy not just for the game, but for the feeling it carries. It is the promise of being young again, of sailing that sea, of feeling that freedom. The company puts nostalgia on the shelf, and we pay thinking we are rescuing the past. But while selling the nostalgia of that original team, the company downsizes the very team that made it possible. It is a blow that hurts, monetizing the memory of someone's work while sending that same person away. We buy the legacy, but whoever built the legacy is being cut. The brand survives, the game returns, but the hands that gave soul to that first version are gone. Then we arrive at the perverse calculation that moves the industry today. Companies discovered that famous franchises yield high profits with low risk. Investing in a new project, with new people creating from scratch, is expensive and unpredictable. Now investing in the people who already made a success. It seems to yield less return in the short term. People ask for growth, conditions, stability. The IP asks for nothing, it just yields. So the logic inverted. Profit is no longer in betting on creators, but in managing the archive. The industry became a sort of museum that sells expensive tickets to see the same painting, just with a new frame. Except the original painter was sent away. And we, the players, end up financing a cycle where creation dies and curation triumphs. We applaud the past without realizing we are assassinating the future. This is not exclusive to Ubisoft. It is the recipe that the entire industry is adopting. Old franchises are mined, remasters multiply, and the people who could invent the next Black Flag are seen as an unnecessary expense. We need to understand, every time we buy nostalgia without questioning who made it, we validate that brands are worth more than creators. And this is not about a company, it is about us. We talk so much about numbers, profit margins, and cost optimization that we end up forgetting that on the other side there is a flesh and blood person. Imagine you, a professional, arriving every day at a studio you love. You spent years of your life there, built friendships, learned to read your colleagues' mood just by the way they type, and transformed that place into a second home. It is a bond that goes beyond the contract. And then think about the effort. You worked overtime that nobody officially asked for, but everyone knew was necessary. You slept poorly, canceled plans, met deadlines that seemed impossible, and in the end delivered a well-reviewed game. Critics praised it, players flooded social networks with compliments, and you felt that genuine pride of having participated in something that went right. Except this feeling has a short expiration date. Because days later, sometimes weeks, the email arrives, or the 5-minute meeting. You are out. The company you helped put at the top, which will profit from the success of your work, simply removes you from the boat. It is not because of something you did wrong. It is because, from its perspective, you already fulfilled your function. The victory was theirs, the layoff is yours. How can anyone plan a career like this? How do you buy a house, think about having kids, dream of stability, if your job can evaporate at the exact moment the product shines? Uncertainty stops being a distant possibility and becomes the rule of the game. You no longer build, you survive cycle by cycle, knowing the end could be in the next release. Naturally, this drives talent away. The best professionals, those who have options, start looking for other sectors. They go to technology, to cinema, to any area where delivering good work does not ironically mean their own dismissal. The games industry stops being a dream and becomes a risk calculation. Whoever can escape, escapes. The industry is left with a huge hole. Those left over are those who could not get out, or the young people who enter still deluded without knowing the rule. Expertise leaves, passion becomes cynicism, and the ability to make games that truly matter slowly falls apart. The machine keeps turning, but it loses its most precise parts. So when you see Ubisoft laying people off after the success of Black Flag Resynced, understand this is not an isolated case. It is the entire industry creating, on purpose or through negligence, an environment where nobody wants to stay anymore. The game continues, the franchise is there, but those who make the magic are giving up. And when there is no one left willing to give their soul, we are going to miss it in games. But by then, it will be too late. There is a question that reverberates on Reddit, in comments, in streams, every time a big game comes out broken. Why do so many games arrive incomplete? We look at the bizarre bugs, at textures that do not load, at stories that seem to have holes the size of a universe, and we are left with that feeling that something came out half done. But we rarely connect this question with the news we saw back there about Ubisoft laying people off right after launch. However, they are exactly the same wound, just showing the other side. The truth is that teams change constantly. The guy who was programming the AI system at the beginning of the project is not the same one adjusting enemies at the end. The artist who created the visual identity of the world left in the middle of development, and whoever arrived inherited the files, but not the intention. When you do not have human continuity, you do not have creative continuity. It is like trying to paint a picture where every month a new painter arrives, who has never seen the original sketch. And the experienced people, those who knew how to solve complicated problems, are exactly the ones leaving. They take with them not only the technique, but the memory of everything that went wrong and went right before. Without them, the project becomes an orphan. When an old bug reappears, nobody knows why it existed anymore. When a system needs refinement, nobody has the reference of how to do it in that special way. The knowledge evaporated, and the game misses it in every stuttered frame. Then enters the chaos of directions. Projects change course because the new team needs to prove it is doing something different, or because management changes and wants to mark territory. Development restarts, features are cut, others are shoved in hastily to meet a fiscal mid-year. It is no longer about the vision of the game. It is about surviving each organizational twist. The product stops being a work of art and becomes a Frankenstein of piled up, conflicting decisions. And then, inevitably, the player receives what is left over. Unfinished games, full of bugs, without identity. That world that should be immersive feels assembled from pieces of other things. The mechanics that promise to innovate do not work right because whoever conceptualized them was no longer there to polish them. The story that should move you feels written by a committee because it passed through so many hands and directions that the original voice got lost. You feel that the game has no soul, but you cannot explain why. The soul walked out the door along with the team that was laid off. The fault is not the developers who is there now, desperate, trying to fix what did not break because of them. The fault lies with the system that created an environment where nobody can stay long enough to love and finish what they started. The industry became a treadmill where the game needs to come out. Not because it is ready, but because the quarter ended. And quality became a luxury variable, sacrificable in the name of efficiency. Perhaps then, the next time we encounter a game that seems to have been abandoned before maturing, we will remember that this is not bad luck, nor incompetence from whoever coded it. It is the direct consequence of an industry that learned to discard people before discarding deadlines. That celebrates the launch, but forgets that the game only was not stillborn because someone, barely, still managed to give the final push. This is not about Ubisoft, it is about the whole machine that we help keep turned on. And that, in the end, returns to us exactly what it deserves. Empty products, made by people who are already gone. We need to be honest, after everything we talked about here, we spent the whole video using Ubisoft as an example, but it would be too easy and misleading to let it carry the weight of this guilt alone. The truth is that Ubisoft is not a malicious exception in a sea of well-intentioned companies. It is, at that exact moment of the launch and the layoffs, merely the mirror that reflects an image the entire industry tries to hide. We know this is not just them. Electronic Arts has done this, Microsoft has done this, Embracer did this, Sony did this, studios we idolize and publishers we respect repeated the same script. They closed studios that were making a profit, laid off after record sales, treated people as an adjustment variable in quarterly reports. The difference is that Ubisoft, perhaps through carelessness or perhaps through cynicism, left the seams visible. The timing between the celebration and the cut became exposed, and we could not ignore it. But if we look closely, the question that remains is not why Ubisoft did this. The question is deeper, and it is uncomfortable. If even a successful game ends with layoffs, is the problem really one company? Or did the entire industry start seeing people merely as numbers? We have seen this happen so much that it almost stopped being a scandal. It became Tuesday. It became a spreadsheet. And when something becomes routine news, it is because the entire system accepted it as normal. The answer lies in our own sense of déjà vu. We read this news, sigh, and move on to the next one. Because deep down we already know, it is not a company breaking a promise. It is an industry that rewrote the rules of the game. The product is eternal, the brand is sacred, but whoever creates is disposable. This is not a bug, it is a feature. And we, the consumers, sometimes participate without realizing it, buying the game, feeding the machine, thinking this does not concern us. Except it does, and it does more than we imagine. Because when a developer loses their job, they are not the only one who loses. We lose too. We lose experience, creativity, and slowly, the games that one day made us fall in love with this industry.